Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to rise in the House today to read the second reading of the Bee Act. Many days, Mr. Speaker, I often feel like a middle-aged, domesticated Snow White or Little Bo Peep, for I speak for the cows, the fish, the pigs, the chickens, the turkeys, the horses, and yes, today I speak for the bees. All kidding aside, this Act is a serious bill critical to the success of the sector. It's unfortunate I couldn't deliver it yesterday, as it was World Bee Day, but the opposition had other important issues to deliver, and we were patient, and we continue to be patient. This Act is important because our apiary and agriculture sectors are major economic contributors to our province's rural communities. In 2020, the honeybee sector was valued at approximately $1.96 million. This includes revenues from honey production and pollination services. The intent of the Act is to modernize oversight over the bee industry and to offer better protections against invasive species. Mr. Speaker, New Brunswick's bee sector plays a vital role in the pollination of crops, particularly for wild blueberry producers. The province's wild blueberry industry makes use of up to 28,000 imported bee colonies and as many as 12,000 New Brunswick colonies to pollinate wild blueberry crops. Imported bees can pose a risk, however, of disease and pests being brought into the province, as they can infect New Brunswick bees. Mr. Speaker, there are roughly 36 commercial beekeepers with 50 or more colonies who manage 87% of New Brunswick's 12,000 registered colonies. 352 hobby beekeepers manage the remaining 13% of the colonies. This new Bee Act will allow for the better protection of the apiary sector, which aligns with the government's commitment on food security. Mr. Speaker, our existing Apiary Inspection Act was adopted in 1973 for a bee industry based upon honey production. Since that time, beekeeping services for pollination, particularly for the blueberry sector, have surpassed honey production as the primary source of income for larger beekeepers. While there's been considerable growth in the number of New Brunswick colonies being used for crop pollination, there also has been a dramatic increase in the importation of colonies from outside the province. As wild blueberry expansion continues, naturally, the requirement for imported colonies to meet pollination needs will continue to rise as well. Imported bees can impose a risk of disease and pests being brought into the province, as they can infect and/or infest New Brunswick bees. I strongly believe that by creating a new Bee Act, we will be better able to protect bee health, which in turn will support our apiary and agriculture sectors. This new Act will allow us to address the annual importation of bees for pollination and the increased threat of importation of disease and pests that could seriously impact the provincial agriculture industry. The importer will be required to have an import and transport permit, and bees must pass a health check in their province of origin before being allowed into New Brunswick. A transit permit with similar bee health provisions will also be required for any bees travelling through the province on their way to somewhere else. The provincial apiarist will be able to create quarantine zones for colonies suspected or known to contain disease or pests of concern to mitigate the risk of spread of the disease. The new Act will allow for more effective enforcement measures to bring about increased compliance. Mr. Speaker, the scope of the Act will also be broadened. Instead of just applying to the honeybee, the Act will apply to any species of bee outlined in the regulation. This will allow the Department of Agriculture, Aquaculture and Fisheries to add other species in the future should it be decided that they require regulatory oversight as well. Mr. Speaker, this is a general overview of the main aspects of the Act that are new or updated. I would also like to point out that we have had extensive discussions with the beekeeping and crop sectors before introducing this Act. I want to thank everyone who took time to share their thoughts on the future of these sectors. And if there's one thing I can assure you today, Mr. Speaker, it is the dedication of the department's staff on the issue of beekeeping and crop production. I commend them for their professionalism in providing expert and scientific advice to the industry and to the public. With this in mind, I ask all members of this House to support our new Bee Act. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.